There we go. Okay. We are now officially recording. So, like I said, Dialogues on Race, and it comes with a DVD, and the DVD has uh, 7 chapters. And the first one is What Does It Mean to Be White? Which
Mm.
sounds like, well, sounds like it's not a very difficult
Yeah,
question to answer. However,
really.
when we watch the DVD, you'll see that it's a lot more complicated than it looks originally. So let me see if we can.
Can we require this? I'm sorry. So,
Let's see. Share screen.
Oh, Miss Carrie, you're still mute. I could see you talking, but you're still muted, ma'am.
Click that. Go share.
we don't do anything. Okay, there we go.
All right. So let's see. And then we do playback. Video. Open disk. No, I don't want to open disk. I want to play. Play. There we go. Play. Disk. Play. And it's spinning up. Good grief. Good grief. Oh, yay. And there we go. Chapter 1. So this is, what does it mean to be white? Everybody can hear?
Yep.
Good.
November 2008. This was the night many people in the United States believed that our nation's long history of racial division had come to an end. We were entering what was optimistically called post-racial America. But in the decades since the American people elected the country's first black president, most of our nation's most complex social issues continue to revolve around race. Why is this such a stumbling block for us? What will it take for us to finally come together? Can the issues of race ever truly be overcome? Or is it just human nature to divide ourselves along racial lines?
There are a lot of people who believe that racism is there, it's always going to be there, there's nothing you can do about it, you are the race you are, blah, blah, blah. And I say, no, this is something we made up.
Wait, what?
This is something we made up.
So if we made race up, what's the story? A closer look at history reveals that the story of race is a story of labor. Most of us were taught that North America was initially colonized by those seeking religious freedom. But in fact, most Europeans, including the Pilgrims, came for land and economic opportunity. At that time, there was no concept of race as we know it. No one identified by the color of their skin, but by their country of origin: French, English, Dutch, Spanish. By the early 17th century, the colony's plantation economy was booming. This created a massive need for cheap labor, a need largely filled by poor European immigrants. Some landowners also used enslaved people from African nations, but at the time, an enslaved person's status was not lifelong. One could gain their freedom. However, in 1676, enslaved Africans joined with European indentured servants in a large rebellion against the colonial government in Virginia. Alarmed by the natural alliance between the indentured and enslaved, the ruling class passed a series of laws that segregated and permanently enslaved those of African descent, while also giving their European counterparts new rights and status. This divide and conquer strategy paved the way for what would become an organized system of racial chattel slavery.
And that was how you kept a system in place, and why you had white people who were poor not challenging the system, because they were sold a bill of goods that somehow whiteness was going to include them in all the benefits of society.
The first legal use of the term white appeared in 1691 in a document created by the colonial government of Virginia.
Sorry, I want to stop it there because they fly through this so fast that you can't get a chance to really read it. But yeah, whatsoever English or other white man or woman being free shall intermarry with a Negro, mulatto, or Indian man or woman, or bond or free, shall within 3 months after such marriage be banished and removed from this dominion forever.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Right.
That is from the Dominion of the United States, or
No, Virginia.
Virginia.
This is Virginia.
not surprising. They have a pretty dark history.
Yeah. The Commonwealth of Virginia. Yeah.
to
Okay.
differentiate people by the color of their skin rather than their nation of origin. In 1790, Thomas Jefferson put forth the first U.S. national census, which placed the population into the categories of free white males, free white females, and all other free persons. Enslaved black people were counted as well, but only as 3/5 of a person. Native Americans weren't counted at all. And at its first seating, Congress passed the Naturalization Act, which stated that only free whites could become United States citizens.
You have to be white. That was the first thing they said. The very first thing. You have to be white.
What humans have done is ascribe meaning and difference to skin colors and then use those meanings to create hierarchies. And so when we say race is socially constructed, it's about the ways in which humans have created hierarchies related to racial difference.
The construct of race, as a way to assign value to human beings, became woven into the structures of this new nation, with white people valued above all others. This ideology has been upheld and reinforced throughout our country's history, continually seeking legitimization through pseudoscience, civil policy, and bad theology, all examined through a white lens.
White supremacy is the idea that not only is it great to be white, but it's better than anybody else. It's better than any other color. It is the best. The way that white folks do things, the way that white folks think, the way that white folks do church, the way that white folks write and talk about God, it's better than anybody else.
As a person of color, I notice this when I walk into denominational headquarters or I walk into seminaries and Christian colleges, and I look at all the important people of that denomination, and they're old white men. And it's telling me that for the history of this denomination or for the history of this Christian college or university, they believe that the only important people to put up on the walls are old white men. That implicitly is affirming or asserting white superiority.
Whiteness became a culture in and of itself, to be defended at all cost. In the 19th century, Chinese immigrants became another target of racially biased policies.
And because there was this fear that these Chinese laborers were stealing good white men's jobs, as if those jobs belonged to them, this sentiment kind of emerged and swelled and ultimately led to the Chinese Exclusionary Act, the one and only time we excluded an entire group of people from being able to immigrate into our country just based off their ethnicity. The Exclusionary Act starts as a 10-year act, but it ultimately is extended for 60 years.
European immigrants, such as the Irish, Italians, and Germans, were also initially viewed as a threat and were often persecuted. But they had one distinct advantage: they were light-skinned. So, over time, by stripping away or hiding their ethnic heritage, eventually they could assimilate and become white. The United States has been referred to as the melting pot, a metaphor for the fusion of nationalities, cultures, and ethnicities.
I've never really liked the term melting pot because it just means that it's going to become one thing. And so who decides what the one thing is? When you're the minority, that means that everything of yours is lost.
It seems the metaphor of the melting pot, in truth, is a push for white homogeny rather than an embrace of diversity.
My own children are way lighter skinned than I am. And what's happened, I think, even with my children, is that our celebrations and our language are slowly dissipating and disappearing. And I wonder what my grandchildren will be like. They'll be, and I keep thinking they'll be the next white generation.
Today, the concept of race and the structures that hold up whiteness as the norm have become so embedded in our culture that it's extraordinarily difficult for most white people to see the ways they influence life in this country.
For most of us who are white, it's It's the norm. It's just what it means to be human. We don't think of it in racial terms. White privilege or white advantage, whatever language one would prefer, is often invisible to us. We don't see the advantages.
Because being white is what's normal, and it's normal for everybody.
And so my question's always been like, what is white culture? Let's talk about that. And that's hard to define, because really what they're might be alluding to is white supremacy.
We don't see the advantages, and we usually only recognize it when we are with persons of color and they get treated differently than us. What we think is as normal is really an advantage.
And the advantages are often stark. A 2016 national study of household wealth found that the median net worth of white families was 8 times higher than that of Hispanic families and 10 times higher than that of Black families. Another 2016 study revealed that Black, Hispanic, and Native American children are more than twice as likely as white children to be living in low-income homes.
When we focus on what makes us, quote, the same, it denies the fact that our lives are not the same. And we live in different worlds with different realities. And so when we focus on the things that make us the same and we can't agree on humanity.
I think what we have done with race is evil. I mean, I'm of the belief that difference is not evil.
You and I did not start the system of race and white supremacy. But if we do not actively work at uncovering our own inherent bias and tearing down the system, we are guilty still of supporting it.
We need to recognize that we do live in a society that is oppressive to people of color and has a long history of white supremacy.
This has always been who America is. The dissolution of the American exceptionalism dream. We're realizing sort of in our collective consciousness that we're no better than any empire that's ever come before.
There you go.
Well,
Yeah. So.
yeah.
Anything anybody wants?
Can you just
Anything that you heard that you want to say, wow, that's amazing, or anything you heard that you want to say, no, I don't believe that?
I think it's amazing.
Oh, go ahead, Andy.
No. I was just thinking that this is the history that we haven't been taught, that needs to be taught. And I wish we could do this for all of our family at church. I wish we could just put it up on the screen in the sanctuary, and because I think people see, when they see this, they think, oh, well, I'm not a racist, I don't need to watch that. Is it okay if I put a little note on our Facebook thing about come join us? It doesn't mean you're a racist. We just need to learn what the truth is about where we are.
I think the truth is being taught. I know that all 3 of my grandchildren, and especially Jeremy, have been taught everything about slavery, about how it came to be, about the effects of it, and even somewhat about the effects of it today on the economy. So I think we are teaching our children a much truer story than we've ever taught them before. I was amazed at all the things that he learned in last year, and this year he's doing South Carolina history, so you can imagine where that's going. It's quite different. The other comment I wanted to make is that yesterday I was listening to something about the Federal Reserve, and 3 of the Federal Reserve managers went out into, kind of had town halls, and they were literally cut to pieces because of their views, how they viewed their job and what the real world is. And what I really liked was the Black gentleman that spoke up that said, you are supposed to represent everyone, not just the rich. My mother saved her money in a savings account religiously. She did not know how to invest. She you know, was not given that education. None of her friends invest. And now she literally has nothing because it's not earning anything. And why aren't you doing something? And all three of them just apologized and said, you're right. You're absolutely right. So I think maybe, you know, people are starting to look at these embedded items in our society that really just help one segment and not everyone.
Let me put in a PS there, Carrie, because you're right. You're correct. I'm not in the school system anymore. So I'm speaking from the viewpoint of an 82-year-old.
Right. Well, I would be the same way.
I do hope that the schools, and I think they are, the sad part is the schools are getting slammed in many ways for doing that. They're getting criticized for telling the truth. But you're right. You're exactly right. Thanks for adding all that. Sorry.
Yeah, because I was taught literally nothing except, oh, there were slaves. And that was about the entire conversation. His history has gone and really delved into it, you know, and gone through, here's what happened, here's why it happened, and here's the effect on our society today. So
That's great to hear that, because I'm not there anymore, but I just, there's hope.
How schools have changed. I remember what I was taught about how the Civil War happened when I was in school versus what really happened was very different, because, you know, it was a long time ago, you know, that I was sitting in that classroom, probably 1969 or 68, something like that.
Ooh, you're a baby.
Totally different, yeah. When we moved from Charlotte to York, I do not recall prior to that move ever seeing a sign that said black only, white only. I'm sure it was there in Charlotte because we were living in Charlotte, but somehow or another, I guess Charlotte was big enough that the whole separation thing was regional. But in York was small enough that, you know, they had the signs. I mean, Dad walked into the liquor store, and the liquor store had a half wall that ran the length of the liquor store up to the counter. And I looked at him and said, I think you're in the wrong place. And he said, this is the liquor store, isn't it? He said, yeah, but you're on the wrong side. You know, go back out the door and go on the white side of the liquor store. Yeah, very strange stuff. And then now we're seeing the Black Lives Matter movement, and some of the reactions there against that about, well, all lives matter and so on and so forth. And it's like, yeah, all lives matter, but Black lives are the ones that are getting
discriminated.
And discriminated against. So that's why that motto is there. So, Aaron.
Well, you can't honestly say that all lives matter given the inequalities that we have in our society, unless you are actively trying to fix them. Andy's comment made me think back to my own education in South Dakota, the heart of Indian country, and throughout my middle and high school years, I remember doing one unit on Native American history and culture. Yeah, I actually learned far more about it from church in South Dakota. Their anti-racism program is a day-and-a-half course on Lakota Dakota culture, history, and language. I actually got way more out of the church course than I ever did out of my school education. So that's a problem. I mean, unfortunately, the schools have a lot of demands on them now with higher standards and to keep all the kids caught up and lower funding, so higher student teacher ratios, and that's an issue unto itself. But I mean, it is important that we talk with our kids and our teens about race issues. I mean, it's important to communicate with them, as parents, as guardians, as youth leaders, as a church, and as schools. It's racism is something that infects every institution in society. So it's something that needs to be addressed from multiple places.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did you
Amen.
feel about the Hispanic fellow who talked about his children and then his grandchildren? When I went to Nuevo Amanecer, I remember that one of the presentations was generational worship with the Hispanic community, and basically he was saying the same thing. By the fourth generation, most of the fourth generation kids can't speak Spanish anymore.
They've lost it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's sad.
So, but he was also saying that, however, the liturgy and the worship still needs to maintain some sort of a Hispanic flair in order for them to still be able to celebrate their culture and their ethnicity. So how do you do that? It's another question, but it was interesting.
I like the thing being. You can't see me, or I'd raise my hand, but I'm horrible. I'll do better next week. I don't know where this came from, but when he said the melting pot, which is the most common view of, everybody just assimilate and become, I've heard it referred to, and I like it better, as the salad bowl, which gives you a sense of keep your own culture, identity, and yet, be in the mix with others. How you do that, I have little idea. Because I think it does just sort of, I guess for a long time I thought that you wanted to not see color, but I've learned differently that actually people of color want to be identified as who they are. So that's been an interesting thing for me to learn.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw something out there, and y'all don't have a meltdown, okay? Don't go berserk or anything. I was speaking with someone, we have kind of different mindsets about things. I'll leave it at that. But their question was this: if everyone wants to keep their identity in some way, like Mike said, they need that bit of Hispanic in the service. The Italians need something to be Italian. But you can have a Black beauty pageant, you can have a Hispanic beauty pageant, but you are looked at racist if you have a white beauty pageant. You cannot have anything that says white, but you can have something that says Asian, Indian, whatever. But the minute you say white, it's bad. And that was somebody else asking the question. And honestly, I didn't know. I didn't know how to answer it, but I did understand the concept of what they were saying. So I just said, well, maybe, we should call it an American beauty pageant. They said, well, that's great. If it's American, all those other nationalities can come in. But if you say white, they can't. But yet a white cannot be in a Black beauty pageant. So it's a hard subject. To me, it's really, I don't see the way that person sees, but I could understand their thought process some. I think they had gone beyond the limits, but
I've heard that too, Carrie, and I don't know. I understand what they're saying. I don't know what to say in response.
Yeah, I don't either, because we're all a mix. I mean, if I look back at my history, I'm a mix of Swedish, English, German. I mean, I've got all of it. I don't have any of that heritage, and I don't feel that I've lost anything really by not having it, although I love Celtic music and things like that. But I feel like an American.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
I think the way in which they've pointed out the fact that white is normal. That's what one of the women said. But the one who was sitting in church on the church pew, with white, everybody thinks white is normal. So if you want to be normal, so it's a beauty pageant. What do you mean? It's not a white beauty pageant. It's just a beauty pageant. It's a normal beauty pageant, just like anybody would have. But there's still that advantage is still embedded in there, which is why a Black beauty pageant has to happen in order to be able to say there's something, there may be something different in the way in which people of color see beauty versus the way we white folks see beauty.
I think it's an effort to be seen. It's an effort to, we're here, even though it does create a dilemma, in what we're dealing with, trying to get everybody to understand this. It's a cry for help. But Carrie, if you say that to the people that I'm aware of you're talking to, you're like, but you get all kinds of stuff back. So.
Yeah, I was trying to be very careful in my response because I didn't really want to debate the fact.
Yes, I hear you. Mm-hmm.
That wasn't what I was looking for. Excuse me.
But we do need to talk about it. That's the if we don't learn, and as I said, I'm so glad to hear you say the kids coming along are getting the truth in education. But there's, lots of others that, they'll just look at you and say, well, I don't understand. I'm, white. I'm not any better than anybody. You just get off on that. I don't see it that way. And yet it's so deeply embedded in the white population that they don't even know it's there. I don't think most of them really do.
I think for a lot of the youth, it is changing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say for everyone. I guess it depends on the home you're brought up in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I can truthfully say, to the best of my knowledge, that my 3 grandchildren do not see color when they see face. Emily's best friend is Asian. That's her very closest best friend. And I just don't see them, and we've talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see race the way we were brought up to see it. And my mother was a racist. I'm very open about that. So I was brought
blessed.
up with
my
that.
mother was too much. She was ahead of her time, so I profited from that. But
well, I think that's the issue, is that you're going to have a generation like that stops, recognizes white privilege and stops utilizing it. Police circumstances are the ones that I can think of the easiest. Folks who get stopped, and I've heard story after story of African American couple get stopped, and all of a sudden they get asked all these questions. Before you know it, the guy's on the hood with his hands on the hood, getting frisked, and it becomes. Whereas if it was a white couple, they would have said, "Where are you going? What are you doing? Why'd you make the U-turn? Oh, well, I forgot something. Oh, okay, well, be careful. Have a nice night."
Yeah,
exactly.
And it ended up being a whole fiasco. And of course, the guy was a guy, and so he started getting peeved about the fact that this cop is, making a big deal out of this. And fortunately, he managed to keep his cool, and he ended up letting them go, and they went on their merry way. But that wouldn't happen to a white person.
No, it wouldn't
today. So the question is, will we, how do we end up raising a generation that doesn't happen, that the police force doesn't profile particular folks? How do we have
the first thing is we should make it absolutely unthinkable that they would do that, whether through training or maybe we just have to let some of them go. But there's really just no excuse for that at this point in time. It's just unthinkable with all that has happened over the past 5 years that they're still doing that.
Right.
I was going to add in here, when Cindy and I were considering doing the current Just Faith series, and we're going to hold on it, but somehow in the conversation and the training with them, Cindy came back to me when we were talking and saying that it was opening her eyes to the dilemma of the others, meaning anyone other than white, that it isn't so much supporting them or saying, oh, we agree, we understand, but the need to walk beside them. To actually be in it. I can't explain how she said it, but it made me think about that. It's not just understanding it and knowing all the facts and knowing the true history, but actually being willing to be with them, physically, emotionally, every other way, to move this forward. Anyway, okay, that's it. Through.
Yeah. and worship. When I think about worship and I think about African American church worship versus us white folks in the Episcopal Church, is it different?
Well, what about our own? What about our own Spanish, Hispanic membership in our own church?
Yep.
How many of us go to their service?
Yeah.
I mean, a number of them come back when we were having service, but I mean, just they'll come to the typical white American, whatever you want to call us. But how many of us actually go there and sit with them? Me too, but thank you, Mike. That just crossed my mind.
Yeah, but really much more so since Padres left. I must admit, because when Padre was here, it was easy to just, well, Padre's got it, it's good, and I'm gonna go home and eat lunch.
Right.
But that's the fact that there are the cultural differences worship wise with the Hispanic community. I mean, when you have a baptism in the Hispanic community, it is a big deal.
It is a deal.
And you're going to have a big luncheon, and you're going to have everybody gathered together, and you're going to have your, first communion. First communion is if the girls have their white dresses on, and the guys have their suits, and and you're talking what, third graders or something like that, second graders, and they look cute as a button. I'll tell you what,
beautiful.
It's hilarious and wonderful. But it's just a whole different way of doing church in a lot of ways.
Well,
And,
we've been to a couple of funerals in Black churches. And if you want to see something different, let me tell you, it is different. You know, it's a hours-long affair.
Right.
I can't remember what they're called, East something, but the women come in. It's Eastern something, and they're dressed in white from head to toe.
Right.
And there's about 12 or 15 of them, or there were the one we went to. I mean, it was just totally different from any funeral I have ever been to. So yeah, there are a lot of differences, and I don't think they want to give up their differences any more than we want to give up ours.
Right. Right. Wasn't it Martin Luther King Jr. who said this, 11 o'clock on Sunday is the most segregated hour.
Yes, and he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still true today. I mean, that was 1965. He says that. Still here we are, 2020. And
it does seem that some of the non-denominational churches have overcome that.
Yes.
When you see them, they, because I've been to one of those too for an occasion, and it was a very mixed group of people, very mixed. Gosh, there were probably as many Blacks and few Asians there as there were whites. I mean, it was very mixed, and I don't know how they accomplished that or how we could accomplish it, but it really struck me, the mix in that service.
Yeah. Almost as if they created their own separate.
Well, you get rid of the identification of Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Buddhist. I mean, whatever whatever the circumstances to form them. So you eliminate that kind of, which gives you a little bit of a head start, I would think. I don't know.
Well, we have a Black bishop who's fantastic. I put him up there above the Pope, right above the Pope. I just can't get enough of him. He's fabulous. We've had a gay bishop. We've had a female bishop. So I think we're, as Episcopals, trying.
We're moving.
But it's not reflected in the congregation.
Not yet.
Not enough.
Well, and it's honestly, it's not totally reflected in the College of Bishops, in the House of Bishops either.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because in the UK, bishops are appointed, and once female bishops were permitted, very quickly they had a higher percentage of female bishops in their House of Bishops than we have in our own. And I think that still holds true.
Slow progress, slow. I want to see more before I have to go away. So I want to be able to see some of this really get going before I go.
If you have a minute, by the way, there's a Brene Brown and Michael Curry
I listened.
podcast. That's
Good.
amazing.
Yep. It
Can't
was
remember
good.
but yeah, I think if you just Google Brene Brown and Michael Curry, it'll pop up probably.
It was something mainly, well, of course, I guess the impetus was his new book, which I
Yes,
could
yeah.
also
He was
like.
basically
Yeah.
talking about his new book, but yeah, and so he's talking about The Way of Love, which is
Mhm.
the name of the book. Love is the way. That's the name of the book.
Mhm. It was a good podcast.
It was wonderful. It was really enlightening and enjoyable and help just sort of uplifting, frankly.
It was.
Brene Brown was that way too. She says, I feel like I'm going to church. This is great.
I just love the laughter. I love to listen to him laugh. He's
Yeah, true.
comes from the way down in the gut. Yeah.
So we haven't answered any questions and solved any issues, we probably won't over the course of the next 7 weeks. But at least we're hopefully getting a little more aware of the circumstances. What's inherent in the system, and how did it happen? I thought that was, for me, that was the most helpful part of the thing. Was there's actually this historical thing that happened over the course of the history of the United States where we systematically made changes that made us better than everybody else.
And are still doing it, just like the Federal Reserve. They pointed out, you're still doing it after all these years. I mean, even the war on drugs led to the phenomenal numbers of blacks incarcerated. And guess what? When they're incarcerated, they can't what? They can't vote.
Right.
So you've wiped out, tens of thousands and thousands of blacks can vote.
Well, and I think I think we're still struggling with it even after a person has served their time. They still are not given the right.
It depends
to vote.
on the state.
Okay.
It depends on the state. They're all.
All right. You know more about that. Will I embarrass you guys if I'll try to be nice and sweet? Hard for me. I'm sorry. You get to know yourself when you get to be a certain age. But anyway, to put a little thing in our friends and whatever about how great this was, and maybe we can get some more people to join. Not that I'm happy with the four of us. It's great, but
yeah, you have better conversations with more people.
So if I can, will that embarrass you or should I field it by you to proof it before I?
We are recording, so that will be available. Probably we'll put it on our.
Okay, so you're
probably what we'll do is we're going to put this on our YouTube channel. We'll have a link to the YouTube channel.
Okay, so they can come in. You're way ahead of me on technology. So in other words, they could go into it and look at it.
Right.
And then maybe join us next week or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aaron?
Yeah, well, and I wonder too, Andy, I sent around a little graphic for virtual coffee hour, and I was just looking at the e-blast, and it looks like Jennifer made a graphic for this. I wonder if we could, there's some version of that could be downloaded to a phone, and I could text it to you, and then if you wanted to do a personal invitation, then you can just send that on to them, and it has the codes in it and everything.
Okay, well, we tried that. I hate to tell you this, but in getting to know myself, I terrify people. I don't mean to, but it may be coming from other.
Andy, I don't find you scary at all.
Well, no, because you're similar to me. But anyway, I'll be glad to do something. But as I said, but I don't know if it's in me or what it is. But when I would say things, people go, "Oh, I think you're scared to death. You're going to send me to the principal." Anyway, that's just so I don't want to get that reaction.
I'm just thinking a personal invitation might be a little bit more effective than a blanket notice too.
Yeah. Right. Well, you do that as anything, and we'll work on it. Carrie, jump in, and Mike, of course, you're the leader. You're the principal.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm just the guy who set it up.
Well, good, because I said Cindy got overwhelmed with work and whatever else, so I thought about doing the just on this unwholesome.
Well, Next week, it is Christmas Cookies from Cambodia is the name of the episode for next week. And I actually haven't previewed it yet, so I got to be honest, I have no idea what that's about. So hopefully I will review it before next Thursday and have some ideas about what I want to say, but it's
Intriguing.
That's right. Cambodia Christmas cookies. I will try to comb my hair next week so I can be on camera, but I didn't get that part today.
Yeah. Christmas. I don't know why it's I have previewed it, and in Christmas cookies. I don't know why it's called Christmas cookies from Cambodia, but it's because it talks about really the concept of race in the Bible and how the Bible was used to justify slavery and so on and so forth. So, and the difference between what we read in the Bible and what it was intended in the Old Testament versus how it was utilized by us in justifying some of the things that we were doing. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting. I don't know why they call it Christmas Cookies from Cambodia, but it's a very interesting session. So yeah, join us next week. It'll be fun because it actually gets down directly to us and to our theology. How do we do theology with all of these issues that we're dealing with? So anything else?
I plan to be here. I'll miss you guys in between, but it's great to see your faces.
Yeah, we'll be here.
Right,
we're here on Sunday.
Yes, we are.
Thanks, Mike.
I watch the sermons. I'm not talking about that. Or see, there you go again. I didn't say what I meant, or you just anyway. And I have to get to church when I can. Love you all.
Love you too.
Love you too, Andy. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
It was an enriching discussion.
Yes.
It was.
Blessings to all.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.